Welcome to X1T Gaming, and together we're going to revolutionize the gaming industry. So today we're going to be learning a little bit about lighting for Blender. One of the things that I want to be able to do is kind of make those flashing lights stuff. So I'm hoping that this lighting is actually going to show us how to make like neon lights. That would be really great. So what I was thinking. So this is the thing right here. I know it's not much now, but I'm proud of it. This spiral thing, like it took me like, I don't know, you guys saw it took me like 14 days of trying to figure this out just to be able to get it. Yeah, and it looks like a really nice circle. It should work just great. I'm going to still need to put like a little bit of a bumper here, but I'm going to put the bumper after I put the pegs in, because I want to know what kind of layout for the pegs that I'm going to do. And I also want to do some like flashy art design, put some like neon, was it like lights, whatever on here. So I'm hoping that when we look at the lighting stuff, that's what we're going to learn, and not just like, oh, if you drag the slide over here, it makes different effects. And I'm like, because here's the light right here, right? So I'm hoping that it doesn't be like, oh, you just need to drag this light, and then wherever you put it makes it different, right? Or if you rotate it, oh, it's not working, not changing at all. Well, whatever. But yeah, so maybe I need to learn a little bit of lighting too. So we're going to watch them together. There's just two videos at the moment. Yeah. And boom. So light types and then 3-point lighting. I don't think we're going to get what we want to make that vibrant neon stuff. But then
Lights are an essential part.
Maybe we can actually put one of these lights inside of it, make it illuminate. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see.
Of making your scene. Without them, everything would be dark. So let's quickly go over what kind of light options you might have. For starters, we already have a light in our default scene right next to our cube here. But as of right now, we can't see the light actually doing anything. That's because we're still in solid or preview mode. To see how our light is affecting our meshes and shaders, simply go to rendered mode. You can do that in the top right hand corner by clicking the rightmost sphere or using the Z hotkey pie menu. As you can see, we now have our cube being lit up by our light. Our current default light is a point light and will emit light in all directions with a fall off. To change our light type, simply go to the light settings in the properties editor. Aside from point lights, we also have sun, spot, and area lights. Each one of these does something slightly different. The sun object emits global light from the specified vector direction, regardless of where the light object is located. Spotlights work pretty much how you might expect a spotlight to look, and area lights are just like point lights but biased towards a specific direction, so rotation will matter. There are also additional settings for each one you can play with, but this is the basic idea behind each light object type. Now in Cycles, you can also use emission shaders to light up a scene. If you simply give an object an emission shader, it will cast light on its environment as well. However, this does not work in Eevee.
Yeah, I don't know what Eevee is, but I think what they just said was what we're looking for.
Lighting can be one of the most important factors of making your scene look presentable. Oftentimes, you can spend hours on a model, but none of the detail is visible at render because it's either too dark or too bright. For this, we're going to go over a very simple way to make sure your lighting setup looks good. 3-point lighting. 3-point lighting is a standard setup for lighting that has carried on through the ages as one of the best ways to light a scene. In film, photography, painting, and now digital graphics. Let's go over exactly what it is, why it's so good, and how to set it up in Blender. 3-point lighting consists of 3 lights, hence the name. These lights are called the key light, the fill light, and the rim or backlight. Let's go over each of these real quick. The key light is the main light. It's the primary or key light source. So when someone looks at a scene and says, oh, the light's coming from the top left-hand corner, they're most likely referring to the key light. That's the light that defines the light source in the scene. Now, the fill light is the one that sort of fills or softens the shadow that the key light casts. It's usually the least bright light in the scene, but it's very important. The fill light acts as a way to keep the shadows from being too dark on your subject. That way, you can still see those details and soften the contrast that the key light makes. The third light is called the backlight or the rim light. Now, this, as you might be able to tell from the name, is cast onto the back of the subject. Usually, it's actually the brightest light in the scene, but it's there just to give a sliver of brightness around the edge of your subject. This gives the subject an outline or a rim of light, which helps it stand out from the background. So, let's try to recreate this in Blender. Instead of our default scene, let's go ahead and replace our cube with a monkey. To do this, simply left-click select your cube and press the delete key. Then go to the Add menu at the top, go to Mesh, and select Monkey. We're also going to right-click it and select Shade Smooth. Now that we have our monkey in our scene, let's get our 3 light sources set up according to the 3-point lighting technique. We already have a light here, but if you don't, you can simply add it through the same Add menu, but go to Light, Point Light. I'm going to go ahead and treat this first light as my key light. Let's use the Move tool in the Quick Tools bar to bring our lamp to the top left-hand side of our monkey's face. Now, you may notice that our scene is not showing any actual lighting effects. That's because we're in solid mode. To see how our light actually will look at render, let's go ahead and change our viewport to rendered mode. You can do that by going to the top right and clicking the rightmost sphere, or pressing the Z hotkey and using the pie menu. Now that we can see the effect of our light on the monkey's face, we can adjust the light a bit more as needed. If you would like to adjust the brightness of your light, simply go to your Light Properties tab, indicated by a green light bulb icon, in the Properties editor. You can then edit the power of the light by left-click dragging, or you can left-click tap the property and type a number manually. I'm going to go ahead and leave this at the default value of 1000W. Next, we'll make our fill light. Now, as long as you have one light, it can be very easy to make more, as you can simply select the first light object and press Shift-D to duplicate. With this new light, let's place it on the other side of the key light. If the key light is a little higher than the monkey, make sure to place the fill light a little lower. However, it seems a bit too bright on both sides. If you remember from our previous descriptions, the fill light is meant to be the dimmest light in the setup. I'm going to go into our Light Property tab and slide our power value down with left-click drag, all the way down to 0. Then I'll slide it right back up just a little bit to a point where I feel like it's bright enough, but not too bright. That's perfect. Now we can finally add our back or rim light. Let's create a third light object in the same way we did before, and place it behind the monkey's head. For now, we can place it directly behind the monkey's head, but oftentimes it is a bit off-center depending on where the camera is. Feel free to experiment with this to get the best outline shape for your subject. Now, if you remember, the rim light is typically the brightest light in the setup. So let's just start off by dragging that power slider in the Light Properties tab as high as we can get it, until we see that bright white outline around our subject. Just to save you some time, I'll say that the number I decided to use was around 50,000. Definitely the brightest light, but feel free to tweak the numbers based on your scene. Awesome! Now you have your 3 lights set up, and it looks pretty decent. However, let's add a cube to act as our environment real quick. To do this, simply go into the Add menu of the viewport, go to Mesh, and select Cube. We can then scale the cube up with the Scale tool until we find ourselves inside of it. Now, you might notice something a little weird. Our cube is almost completely white. What's happening here is, our environment is now super bright because of our lighting setup. This isn't very ideal, especially if you want to have your character stand out. One reason for the environment being so bright is because we're currently using point lights for our light sources, meaning that they cast light in all directions. In film and photography, the physical lights used are typically directional lights, specifically to avoid this problem. Let's try to do the same. Starting with our brightest light, the rim light. If we select it with left click, we can go into the Light Property tab to see other light options: point, sun, spot, and area. Feel free to experiment with each light type, but I personally like the spotlight for this purpose, as you'll be able to focus the spotlight column as needed. Simply select the spot option and you'll already notice a difference. Our environment is more clear, but our monkey's rim light is no longer there. That's because our spotlight is currently rotated the wrong way. Let's use the rotate tool to point it back at our monkey. Now, because this is a spotlight, you can also adjust your spotlight's effective area by dragging the size value in our light property tab. Awesome! Now our backlight still has the same effect it had earlier, but without the issue of overlighting our environment. Optionally, you can do the same thing for your other two lights, but this can be situational, so feel free to experiment and adapt. And that's it! You now have a beautifully lit monkey in Blender.
Okay, that's it for the lighting. Eevee lighting. Let's do this one. See what this is about.
In order for Eevee to be such a powerful and fast renderer, there are a lot of different methods Eevee uses to calculate lighting compared to engines like Cycles. To start off, let's look at the Render tab in our Properties editor. In here, with Eevee selected as our render engine, you can see several settings that pertain to how Eevee calculates lighting and visuals. This includes several effects such as ambient occlusion, bloom, screen space reflections, and motion blur. In this video, we'll learn how to view each one of these effects and how to adjust their settings. To enable any of these, simply click the checkbox on the left. You can also expand each category by clicking the arrow on the left. However, you may notice that checking these makes no visible difference in the viewport. This is because we are in solid view. In order to view in real time the differences each of these settings might make, simply change your viewport mode to rendered view. You can do that by clicking the rightmost sphere in the top right hand corner of the viewport or pressing the Z key and using the pie menu there. Once in rendered mode, you can test each of these settings to see how they might affect your render. Enabling ambient occlusion will be most apparent at the corners or crevices of your scene. To show this better, let's go ahead and add a mesh plane object and scale it up to act as our floor. This is a real-life effect that can help make geometric detail really pop and often helps renders feel more 3D. Let's take a look at the ambient occlusion settings. Distance affects how far the ambient occlusion shadow extends from the corners. Factor affects the darkness of the shadow, and you can actually manually set it past the maximum of 1.0. For the rest of these ambient occlusion settings, feel free to hover over them for more information, and experiment to get what you like. Bloom is basically another word for glow, but you'll notice when we enable it, it doesn't really change much in the viewport. That's because nothing in our scene is bright enough yet to trigger the bloom effect. But it's a very pretty effect, so let's see if we can get it to show up. Let's select our cube and go to the Material tab, indicated by the red material sphere icon at the bottom of our Properties editor. Here under Surface, we can see that we have the principled BSDF selected by default. This is great, but we want to make it bright. Well, luckily if we scroll down here, there is an emission value. This is a color that we can set. Let's drag the value slider all the way up so that it's the brightest white it can be. Now, this isn't bad, but it's not obvious enough for testing purposes. We can confirm that the bloom is working, however, if we go into our Render Settings tab again and check on and off the bloom checkbox. Yes, the cube is glowing slightly. But how do we make it really glow? Like, a lot. To make the emission even brighter, I'm going to use an emission shader. To do this, let's go into our cube's Materials tab in the Properties editor. We can then switch out our principled BSDF surface shader node for an emission node from the drop-down menu. Now we have a strength value we can increase to our heart's desire. I'm going to set the brightness of our emission to 10. Now that's a lot of bloom. Let's play around with our settings now. Feel free to adjust the threshold slider to determine how bright an object needs to be to start glowing. For example, our emission shader is at a strength of 10, and setting the threshold to 10 in the bloom settings actually stops the glow of the cube perfectly. You can also change the color of the glow, the radius of the glow, and the intensity of the glow. Setting a non-zero clamp value will also set the maximum intensity the glow can be in your scene. The knee value simply makes it so that those objects that are bordering the threshold of the bloom are given some slight leeway to fade the bloom so that the cutoff threshold doesn't look too visually jarring. Next is depth of field. This isn't actually a lighting effect, but I want to go over it anyway. This simulates a real-life camera effect that depends on the focus of the camera. This is when only certain parts of the image are clear, while the rest is blurry based on distance from the focal point. Before we...
Okay, this is a long video, but I think that was pretty much what we wanted. That was what I was looking for. So, yeah, that's interesting. So let's just practice on the background for now. So when I did lighting, it was render properties. And then we put them in the render view. Oh, what? It's so weird. Okay, so we want to go here. So we want to change this to emission, but now it's white. We can change our color back to whatever this color is. Okay, so I could actually play with the background a little bit. I don't think I want to make it that strong if I want to do the background. And then if we went to bloom, huh, I guess we might have to make this a lot stronger. So we'll bring this one up to a 10 like you had. Okay, so this is going to be actually pretty good. I'm going to have to do this color too. Yeah, I'm going to have to play around with these settings. But that's really good because now I could also make this one. Oh wait, do I have to make them the same? And this one will be the same as this color. Oh, and this one we don't need to have it as strong. It would be nice to have a little bit. And this one we could take the strength down. Let's go to 5. But yeah, no, that's actually going to be kind of nice to figure this out, because then you get more of a pop feel, And then I want to maybe have like orange lights and purple lights up here that radiate more of a stronger. It'd be nice to have like a code where they can make them like flicker. But yeah, no, we'll have to work on that next time. We just learned it this time, and then tomorrow we'll edit a lot. But yeah, this is yeah, it's hard making your own models. I'm not a really a 3D modeler myself, but it's definitely something that you gotta learn, and it's good to have a little bit of everything, I think. And then once I learn how to do a little bit of everything, I could probably be more specialized in certain areas. I don't think that modeling is going to be something I get specialized in, but then again, I'm not going to rule that out. It does seem like it might be a little bit easier. Yeah, but yeah, no, we're going to call it a day today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. We do 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and that will be for the rest of the month, and we will see how it works out when I move to the new place, because we're changing time zones. So I might bring it down to an earlier date, maybe 7 Pacific Standard Time. Okay, you guys have a good night, and I'll see you in the next video.